From the moment that we first arrived on the island, we were told that there were natives around the other side, and being the very curious person that I was really quite keen to go around and visit with them. So on about the 4th day that we were there, we decided to hire what's known in the Philippines as a bunker. What that actually is a wooden dugout canoe with 2 outriggers on the side. And when I stretched my arms out, it literally wasn't much bigger, only 7 foot long, and so narrow you couldn't actually sit inside it. You had to put a plank of wood across the top as a bench and sit on that. So it possibly wasn't the most seaworthy going vessel to begin with, but at 22 you don't think of things like that, you really don't. Anyway, I had to try and talk my mother into getting into this canoe because she was frightened of water. I mean, she is so terrified of water, she has a bath and she gets frightened. So trying to talk her into getting into this small canoe and circumnavigating this island was really no small feat. But with my powers of persuasion, I managed to talk her into it, and off we went. However, after about an hour, when the boat began to leak as well and we were having to bail water occasionally, she said, "Michelle, look, I have had enough of this. I want you to drop me back to shore." So I dropped her back off to shore. And I'll never forget the very last thing she said to me. "Please, Michelle, don't go out too far." In retrospect, if only I'd listened to Mother's voice. Mother really does know best. However, whilst I remained within the tranquil waters of the lagoon, I was relatively safe. But once I endeavoured to get around this point, to try and get around the other side of the island, all the ocean currents from behind the island very, very quickly dragged me out to sea. And I found within a very short space of time, I was literally in deep water and deep trouble. To give you an idea of the alarming speed that I was moving at, by the time it was 4:45, I was already so far away from land that all I could see was a white slither of sand on the beach. That's how fast I was moving. It was at that point that I realised if I did not leave that boat and make the attempt to swim to shore, then I was most assuredly going to be spending the night at sea. It was at that point that I put on my mask, snorkel and flippers, hopped onto the outrigger of the canoe and prepared to jump. But just before I did, I heard this incredibly loud, audible voice call out, "Don't leave the boat." My first reaction was one of just the most extraordinary relief. I looked behind me, expecting to see my friend John coming in his launch, saying, "Don't leave the boat, we're here to rescue you." But when I looked around in every single direction, there was absolutely nothing there. Now, I was a person who was always fully in control of all my faculties and not prone to hearing voices, so I really couldn't work out where this voice was coming from. I knew I wasn't hallucinating. I'd only been out there a couple of hours, so where was this voice coming from? I waited about 5 minutes, then said to myself, I don't care who the voice belongs to. If I don't leave this boat, I'm going to be spending the night at sea. So again, I hopped onto the outrigger of the canoe and prepared to jump. And again, this voice that was so powerful boomed out this command: "Don't leave the boat." I got such a fright, I fell face first into the water. And when I crawled back into the canoe, I was actually more afraid of what this voice would do to me if I disobeyed than the thought of spending that night at sea. But when I heard the first clap of thunder peal out across the sky and sheet lightning began to light up the sky, I realised I had made the very biggest mistake of my life, because not only was I lost alone in what was essentially a child's canoe in the middle of the South China Sea, but I realised I had been caught in the midst of a tropical storm. That night was such a night of overwhelming terror that even telling you about it today, it doesn't seem possible that it happened to me. As I said, the boat was too narrow to hop inside. All I could do was lie wedged sideways with my hands gripped onto the front of it. It was like riding the car of a roller coaster. I would ride these enormous waves, and get to the crest of this wave and just look down before I plunged into the next trough. I kept saying to myself, the waves can't possibly get any bigger. But as the night progressed and I moved into deeper water, these waves just got bigger and bigger and bigger until I had mountainous walls of water just coming towards me and crashing into the boat. All I could do was bail water frantically just to stop this craft from sinking, while all night torrential rain poured on me and thunder and lightning peeled out across the sky. I can assure you it's nothing but the grace of God that I'm even standing here talking to you today. However, at 5 a.m. that next morning, an even worse fate awaited me, because at 5 a.m. that next morning, an enormous wave just crashed onto the boat and tipped me out. And after coming incredibly close to drowning, and let me assure you, drowning is a most unpleasant way to die, I reached the surface and swum to the boat, only to discover that not only was this boat now capsized, but somehow it had vacuum sealed itself to the ocean, and no matter what I cried, I could not turn this craft over. And in the storm, one of the outriggers had broken off, and the other one was breaking away from the side. With each wave that crashed upon it, I would hear, I knew I conceivably had a couple of hours, maybe a day, before that other outrigger broke off. And then there was absolutely nothing to hold on to. But of course, the saving grace of today was surely my mother was coming to rescue me. I don't personally believe that there is an age that you ever reach that in the height of a crisis, your parents are not coming to rescue you. And it was the most devastating feeling of betrayal that as hour upon hour passed, it became obvious that my mother was not coming to rescue me. It's probably why I got second-degree burns on my face, because I spent the majority of that day looking up into the sky for a plane or helicopter, looking across the water, expecting any moment that a boat would come powering towards me with my mum in it saying, "It's all over now, Michelle. You can relax. I'm here to rescue you." But that moment just never came. What had happened is I had gone out with a money belt wrapped around my waist, and contained in that money belt was both our passports, all our traveller's checks, and all our cash. Not only do you have a lot of tenacity when you're 22, but you're also incredibly stupid. So my mother didn't have a single solitary cent, and unlike this extremely generous country that we live in, Australia, the Philippines is not so. The Philippines is a third world country. You can't just pick up a phone and dial search and rescue. They required 1,200 American dollars up front in cash before they would even consider sending out a search. And she had no money, and there were no telephones on the island. To be quite honest, in the 5 years since this happened to me, I could not truly appreciate what she went through as a mother until 3 months ago I became a mother myself. Only then could I truly understand what she must have gone through to know that her child was lost at sea in what was essentially just a child's canoe. She experienced the same storm on the island that I did out in the ocean, and yet there was not a single thing that she could do to help me. And at that same moment, I'm feeling that exact same feelings of powerlessness. There was nothing I could do to help myself. I was up to my neck in water with just one arm wrapped around the remaining outrigger. All I could do was sit and wait for help.